Greenwich is an early established district of today's London, England, centred 5.5 miles east-southeast of Charing Cross. The town lends its name to the Royal Borough of Greenwich. Greenwich is generally described as being part of southeast London and sometimes as being part of East London. It is also one of the 5 boroughs of the London Docklands, connected to areas with docks of London historically by river and today to Canary Wharf and other buildings by the East London Line. Greenwich is notable for its maritime history and for giving its name to the Greenwich Meridian and Greenwich Mean Time. The town became the site of a royal palace, the Palace of Placentia, from the 15th century, and was the birthplace of many Tudors, including Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. The palace fell into disrepair during the English Civil War and was rebuilt as the Royal Naval Hospital for sailors by Sir Christopher Wren and his assistant Nicholas Hawksmoor. These buildings became the Royal Naval College in 1873, and they remained an establishment for military education until 1998, when they passed into the hands of the Greenwich Foundation. The historic rooms within these buildings remain open to the public. Other buildings are used by University of Greenwich and Trinity Laban, Conservatoire of Music and Dance. The town became a popular resort in the 18th century and many grand houses were built there, such as Vanbrugh Castle, established on Maze Hill, next to the park. From the Georgian period, estates of houses were constructed above the town centre. The maritime connections of Greenwich were celebrated in the 20th century, with the sighting of the Cutty Sark and Gypsy Moth Ivy next to the riverfront, and the National Maritime Museum in the former buildings of the Royal Hospital School in 1934. Greenwich formed part of Kent until 1889, when the County of London was created. History. Toponymy so named by Danish settlers. Greenwich means the green place of cows on the bay or near the mouth of a river. The settlement later became known as East Greenwich to distinguish it from West Greenwich or Deptford Strand, the part of Deptford adjacent to the Thames, but the use of East Greenwich to mean the whole of the town of Greenwich died out in the 19th century. However, Greenwich was divided into the registration sub-districts of Greenwich East and Greenwich West from the beginning of civil registration in 1837, the boundary running down what is now Greenwich Church Street and Crumbs Hill, although more modern references to East and West Greenwich probably refer to the areas east and west of the Royal Naval College and National Maritime Museum corresponding with the West Greenwich Council Ward. An article in the Times of the 13th of October 1967 stated, East Greenwich, gateway to the Blackwall Tunnel, remains solidly working class, the manpower for 1/8 of London's heavy industry. West Greenwich is a hybrid, the Spirit of Nelson, the Cutty Sark, the Maritime Museum, an industrial waterfront and a number of elegant houses, ripe for development. Manor of East Greenwich. Royal charters granted to English colonists in North America often used the name of the Manor of East Greenwich for describing the tenure as that of free socage. New England charters provided that the grantees should hold their lands, as of His Majesty's Manor of East Greenwich. This was in relation to the principle of land tenure under English law, that the ruling monarch was paramount lord of all the soil in the terra regis, while all others held their lands, directly or indirectly, under the monarch. Land outside the physical boundaries of England, as in America, was treated as belonging constructively to one of the existing royal manors, and from Tudor times grants frequently used the name of the Manor of East Greenwich, but some 17c. grants named the Castle of Windsor. Places in North America that have taken the name of East Greenwich include a township in Gloucester County, New Jersey, a hamlet in Washington County, New York, and a town in Kent County, Rhode Island. Early settlement tumuli to the southwest of Flamsteed House, in Greenwich Park, are thought to be early Bronze Age barrows reused by the Saxons in the 6th century as burial grounds. To the east, between the Vanbrugh and Maze Hill gates, is the site of a Roman villa or temple. A small area of red paving tesserae protected by railings marks the spot. It was excavated in 1902 and 300 coins were found dating from the emperors Claudius and Honorius to the 5th century. This was excavated by the Channel 4 television program Time Team in 1999, broadcast in 2000, and further investigations were made by the same group in 2003. The Roman road from London to Dover, Watling Street crossed the high ground to the south of Greenwich, through Blackheath. This followed the line of an earlier Celtic route from Canterbury to St Albans. As late as Henry V, Greenwich was only a fishing town, with a safe anchorage in the River Viking. During the reign of Ethelred the Unready, the Danish fleet anchored in the River Thames off Greenwich for over 3 years, with the army being encamped on the hill above. From here they attacked Kenton in the year 1012, took the city of Canterbury, making Archbishop Alphege their prisoner for 7 months in their camp at Greenwich. They stoned him to death for his refusal to allow his ransom to be paid, and kept his body until the blossoming of a stick that had been immersed in his blood. For this miracle his body was released to his followers. He achieved sainthood for his martyrdom in the 12th century. The parish church was dedicated to him. The present church on the site west of the town centre is St Alphege's Church, designed by Nicholas Hawksmoor in 1714 and completed in 1718. Some vestiges of the Danish camps may be traced in the names of Eastcombe and Westcombe, on the borders of nearby Blackheath. Norman the Domesday Book records the manor of Greenwich as held by Bishop Oddo of Bayeux. His lands were seized by the Crown in 1082. Plantagenet subsequent monarchs were regular visitors, with Henry IV making his will here, and Henry V granting the manor to Thomas Beaufort, Duke of Exeter, who died at Greenwich in 1426. The palace was created by Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, Henry V's a half-brother and the regent to Henry VI in 1447, enclosing the park and erecting a tower on the spot of the Royal Observatory. It was renamed the Palace of Placentia or Pleasance by Henry VI's consort Margaret of Anjou after Humphrey's death. The palace was completed and further enlarged by Edward IV, and in 1466 it was granted to his queen, Elizabeth. Tudor. The palace was the principal residence of Henry VII, whose sons Henry and Edmund Tudor were born here, and baptized in St Alphege's. Henry favoured Greenwich over nearby Eltham Palace, the former principal royal palace. He extended Greenwich Palace and it became his principal London seat until Whitehall Palace was built in the 1530s. Henry VIII married Catherine of Aragon and Anne of Cleves at Greenwich, and both Mary and Elizabeth were born at Greenwich. His son Edward VI also died there at age 15. The Palace of Placentia, in turn, became Elizabeth's favourite summer residence. Both she and her sister Mary I used the palace extensively, and Elizabeth's council planned the Spanish Armada campaign there in 1588. Stuart James I carried out the final remodelling work on Greenwich Palace, granting the manor to his wife Queen Anne of Denmark. In 1616 Anne commissioned Inigo Jones to design and build the surviving Queen's House as the final addition to the palace. Charles I granted the manor to his wife Queen Henrietta Maria, for whom Inigo Jones completed the Queen's House. During the English Civil War, the palace was used as a biscuit factory and prisoner of war camp. Then, in the interregnum, the palace and park were seized to become a mansion for the Lord Protector. By the time of the Restoration, the Palace of Placentia had fallen into disuse and was pulled down. New buildings began to be established as a Grand Palace for Charles II, but only the King Charles Block was completed. Charles II also redesigned and replanted Greenwich Park and founded and built the Royal Observatory. Prince James, as Duke of York and Lord Admiral until 1673, was often at Greenwich with his brother Charles and, according to Samuel Pepys, he proposed the idea of creating a Royal Naval Hospital. This was eventually established at Greenwich by his daughter Mary II, who in 1692–1693 commissioned Christopher Wren to design the Royal Hospital for Seamen. The work was begun under her widower William III in 1696 and completed by Hawksmoor. Queen Anne and Prince George of Denmark continued to patronize the project. Hanoverian George I landed at Greenwich from Hanover on his accession in 1714. His successor George II granted the Royal Hospital for Seamen the forfeited estates of the Jacobite Earl of Derwentwater, which allowed the building to be completed by 1751. In 1805, George III granted the Queen's House to the Royal Naval Asylum, which amalgamated in 1821–1825 with the Greenwich Hospital School. Extended with the buildings that now house the National Maritime Museum, it was renamed the Royal Hospital School by Queen Victoria in 1892. George IV donated nearly 40 paintings to the hospital in 1824, at a stroke, creating a gallery in the Painted Hall. These now form the Greenwich Hospital collection at the National Maritime Museum. Subsequently, William IV and Queen Adelaide were both regular donors and visitors to the gallery. Victorian, Edwardian, modern and the present Queen Victoria rarely visited Greenwich, but in 1845 her husband Prince Albert personally bought Nelson's Trafalgar coat for the Naval Gallery. George V and Queen Mary both supported the creation of the National Maritime Museum, and Mary presented the museum with many items. The Prince Albert, Duke of York, laid the foundation stone of the new Royal Hospital School when it moved out to Holbrook, Suffolk. In 1937, his first public act as king was to open the National Maritime Museum in the buildings vacated by the school. The king was accompanied by his mother Queen Mary, his wife Queen Elizabeth and the Princess Elizabeth. The Princess Elizabeth and her consort Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, made their first public and official visit to Greenwich in 1948 to receive the freedom of the borough for Philip. In the same year, he became a trustee of the National Maritime Museum. Philip, now the Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, was a trustee for 52 years until 2000, when he became its first patron. The Duke of Edinburgh has also been a patron of the Cutty Sark since 1952. During the Silver Jubilee of 1977, the Queen embarked at Greenwich for the Jubilee River pageant. In 1987, Her Majesty was aboard the P&O ship Pacific Princess when it moored alongside the Old Royal Naval College for the company's 150th anniversary celebrations. To mark the Diamond Jubilee of Elizabeth II, it was announced on 5 January 2010 that on 3 February 2012 the London Borough of Greenwich would become the fourth to have Royal Borough status, the others being the Royal Borough of Kingston-upon-Thames, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea and the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. The status was granted in recognition of the borough's historic links with the royal family, the location of the Prime Meridian and its being a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Governance. Greenwich is covered by the Greenwich Western Peninsula wards of the London Borough of Greenwich, which was formed in 1965 by merging the former Metropolitan Borough of Greenwich with that part of the Metropolitan Borough of Woolwich which lay south of the Thames, along with Blackheath, Westcombe, Charlton, Glendon, Woolwich Riverside, and Woolwich Common. It elects a Member of Parliament for Greenwich and Woolwich. Currently the MP is Nick Rainsford. Geography. Topography. The town of Greenwich is built on a broad platform to the south of the outside of a broad meander in the River Thames, with a safe deep water anchorage lying in the river. To the south, the land rises steeply, 100 feet through Greenwich Park to the town of Blackheath. The higher areas consist of a sedimentary layer of gravelly soils, known as the Blackheath Beds, that spread through much of the southeast over a chalk outcrop, with sands, loam and seams of clay at the lower levels by the river. Greenwich is bordered by Deptford Creek and Deptford to the west, the former industrial centre of the Greenwich Peninsula, and the residential area of Westcombe Park to the east, the River Thames to the north, and the A2 and Blackheath to the south. Nearby areas: Deptford, Blackheath, St John's, Westcombe Park, New Cross, Lewisham, Kidbrooke, Charlton, Peckham, Nunhead, Catford, Woolwich. Climate: this data was collected between 1971 and 2000 at the weather station situated in Greenwich. Sites of interest: riverfront. The Cutty Sark has been preserved in a dry dock by the river. A major fire in May 2007 destroyed a part of the ship, although much had already been removed for restoration. Nearby for many years was also displayed Gypsy Moth IV, the 54-feet yacht sailed by Sir Francis Chichester in his single-handed 226-day circumnavigation of the globe during 1966–67. In 2004, Gypsy Moth IV was removed from Greenwich, and after restoration work completed a second circumnavigation in May 2007. On the riverside in front of the northwest corner of the hospital is an obelisk erected in memory of Arctic explorer Joseph René Bellot. Near the Cutty Sark site, a circular building contains the entrance to the Greenwich Foot Tunnel, opened on 4 August 1902. This connects Greenwich to the Isle of Dogs on the northern side of the River Thames. The north exit of the tunnel is at Island Gardens, from where the famous view of Greenwich Hospital painted by Canaletto can be seen. Rowing has been part of life on the river at Greenwich for hundreds of years, and the first Greenwich Regatta was held in 1785. The annual Great River Race along the Thames Tideway finishes at the Cutty Sark. The nearby Trafalgar Rowing Centre in Crane Street is home to Curlew Rowing Club and Globe Rowing Club. The old Royal Naval College is Sir Christopher Wren's domed masterpiece at the centre of the heritage site. The site is administered by the Greenwich Foundation, and several of the buildings are let to the University of Greenwich and one, the King Charles Block, to Trinity College of Music. Within the complex is the former college dining room, the Painted Hall. This was painted by James Thornhill, and the Chapel of St. Peter and St. Paul, with an interior designed by James Athenian Stewart. The Naval College had a training reactor, the Jason Reactor, within the King William Building that was operational between 1962 and 1996. The reactor was decommissioned and removed in 1999. To the east of the Naval College is the Trinity Hospital Almshouse, founded in 1613, the oldest surviving building in the town centre. This is next to the massive brick walls and the landing stage of Greenwich Power Station. Built between 1902 and 1910 as a coal-fired station to supply power to London's tram system, and later the London Underground, it is now oil and gas powered and serves as a backup station for London Underground. East Greenwich also has a small park, East Greenwich Pleasance, which was formerly the burial ground of Greenwich Hospital. The O2 was built on part of the site of East Greenwich Gas Works, a disused British gas site on the Greenwich Peninsula. It is next to North Greenwich Tube Station, about 3 miles east from the Greenwich Town Centre, northwest to Charlton. The Greenwich Millennium Village is a new urban regeneration development to the south of the Dome. Enderby's Wharf is a site associated with submarine cable manufacture for over 150 years. Greenwich Park behind the former Naval College is the National Maritime Museum, housed in buildings forming another symmetrical group and grand arcade around the Queen's House, designed by Inigo Jones. Continuing to the south, Greenwich Park is a royal park of 183 acres, laid out in the 17th century and formed from the hunting grounds of the Royal Palace of Placentia. The park rises towards Blackheath, and at the top of this hill is a statue of James Wolfe, commander of the British expedition to capture Quebec. Nearby a major group of buildings within the park is the former Royal Observatory, Greenwich, and the Prime Meridian passes through the building. Greenwich Mean Time was at one time based on the time observations made at the Royal Greenwich Observatory, before being superseded by Coordinated Universal Time. While there is no longer a working astronomical observatory at Greenwich, a ball still drops daily to mark the exact moment of 1 p.m. And there is a museum of astronomical and navigational tools, particularly John Harrison's marine chronometers. The Ranger's house lies at the Blackheath end of the park and houses the Wernher collection of art, and many fine houses, including Vanbrugh's house, lie on Maze Hill, on the western edge of the park. Town centre. Georgian and Victorian architecture dominates in the town centre, which spreads to the west of the park and Royal Naval College. Much of this forms a one-way system around a covered market, Greenwich Market, and the art house Greenwich Cinema. Up the hill from the centre, there are many streets of Georgian houses, including the Fan Museum, on Crooms Hill. Nearby at the junction of Crooms Hill with Nevada Street, is Greenwich Theatre, formerly Crowder's Music Hall, one of two Greenwich theatres, the other being the Greenwich Playhouse. Market. There has been a market at Greenwich since the 14th century, but the history of the present market dates from 1700, when a charter to run two markets, on Wednesdays and Saturdays, was assigned by Lord Romney to the Commissioners of Greenwich Hospital for 1,000 years. The market is part of the island site, bounded by College Approach, Greenwich, Church Street, King William Walk and Nelson Road, near the National Maritime Museum and the Royal Observatory. The buildings surrounding the market are Grade II listed and were established in 1827 to 1833 under the direction of Joseph K. The market roof dates from 1902 to 08. Later significant development occurred in 1958 to 60 and during the 1980s. The landowner, Greenwich Hospital, has been enhancing the market since 2014 and due to complete in spring 2016.